Okay, it's June 24th, 2014. This is Brent Björkman, the director of the Kentucky Folklife program, and we're working on our Ranger Lore project here in the Mammoth Cave area. Today we're in right outside Cave City, and we are with the Lees. Could you introduce yourselves and maybe talk to me about the last positions that you had before you retired from the Park Service?
Daniel Lee. I was born in Mammoth Cave area, just 2.5 miles from the entrance of Mammoth Cave.
Oh.
And what was it you wanted to?
And that sounds like a deep connection that you have to the park.
Right.
So how were you led into this type of work, I guess is...
Well, I've stayed at Mammoth Cave then until I was 10 years old. By that time, the National Park Service had taken over the park. And I was familiar with the rangers then. And at the age of 10, that was on my mind from then on.
Mm-hmm.
Then we were moved out of the park in 1936. We moved to Cave City. And we lived in Cave City and went to high school here and then to the military service. And I got out of the service in 1948, and then I met my wife here.
Mm-hmm.
You met me long.
Well, I'll let you mention that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Now, what else we need to know?
Yeah, so you met here, and as far as getting into the Park Service after the military service,
Right.
did that help? Did having military service, do you
had-
think that had a help to get
I
in?
did. I got my first appointment as a park guide in 1948 due to my veteran's preference. Not necessarily that, but you had to be a veteran to qualify at that time. And I worked as a park guide for 1948.
Hmm.
And then,
Seasonal position?
seasonal, that's right. I'm trying to remember.
What?
And you all were married at that time?
No.
Not married.
No, we were married in let's see, November of that same year. And then we both went to Western at that time. I went on the GI Bill, and we lived in the Veterans Village, if you know where the Veterans Village was.
Mm.
Well, it was they had barracks and trailers and apartment buildings down south of the hill there. And then while we were at Western, I applied for a seasonal, and I got on seasonal at Shenandoah National Park. And for the next 3 years, in the summers, I worked as a seasonal in Shenandoah National Park. Now, what would you do?
So what would you do? So you're in Shenandoah. Did you come back here? How were you able to sustain yourself during the rest of the year? If you were a seasonal employee, did you have
GI Bill.
the GI Bill?
It was $90 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had our first child, let's see, in June of
1950.
1950, yeah.
Then we got 105 a month after she was born.
Yeah,
She's a moneymaker.
that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Then after I'd been at Shenandoah, let's see, in 1950, was it 53?
I don't know,
I went to work at a parts department at
52.
52, that's right, because there was no opening and I didn't qualify. Well, I did qualify, but no opening in the Park Service. And I worked in the parts department in a Ford garage in Cave City. Then there was a opening at Abraham Lincoln birthplace as an information receptionist, and I did qualify for that. So that was my first permanent National Park Service job at Abraham Lincoln birthplace in Hodgenville.
When the test was finally given for rangers after the war, there were over 1,500 men who took it for about 150 jobs.
So
So
it was pretty difficult to
it
get
was
in.
very difficult to get in.
Sure. People were looking for work and good,
Well,
solid
Oh,
work.
yeah.
They just basically wanted to be in the Park Service, and there were only a very limited amount of jobs. So he took the test. I don't remember what they called
And
it.
that's a relatively small park compared to
Oh,
and always has been.
it has, oh, yes.
Yeah.
But we were there then nearly 3 years, and I got transferred back to Shenandoah National
Shenandoah.
Park permanently as a park ranger. So Shenandoah was my first job as a park ranger. And we were there then,
5 years.
there 5 years, I believe, and then on the Shenandoah National Park. And then there was a job opening at Chickamauga Battlefield in North Georgia. And we were transferred from a district ranger in Shenandoah to chief ranger at Chickamauga Battlefield. So we were there then
5 years.
nearly 5 years, and got a job back in Shenandoah.
The Blue Ridge.
Blue Ridge, as a district ranger. So we were at Blue Ridge Parkway then as a district ranger for about 4 years, and then from Blue Ridge we went to Custer Battlefield. Nice. Well, it's not called Custer Battlefield now, but
No,
it's what is it? Anyway,
Little Bighorn.
Little Bighorn
Yeah.
Battlefield, and that was my first job as a superintendent
Wow.
in Montana. We were there
Just 2 years.
2.5 years, and they got a call from the regional office one day and asked me if I would be interested in superintendent of Vicksburg, and I asked him, when do you need me?
What was your draw to Vicksburg?
The Southeast.
Southeast. Well, it was different. The weather there was just, you wouldn't believe in the wintertime. It was,
40 below.
yeah. So I told him, well, you couldn't possibly leave before 1 o'clock. So
What year was this? Would this have been?
this would have been 1970.
Mhm.
So we moved into Vicksburg in 1970, and then I stayed there for 14 years as a superintendent.
So tell me about that first ranger position. How was that? I guess I'm also interested in the change in working in the park system. Was it I've heard stories, for instance, about interpretation at Mammoth Cave, and some of the old timers were more about joking around, and it's maybe not as historically accurate or something. And there was a change over time about transmitting different knowledge about that. And I just was wondering, you've had this long career, both of you in different ways, and we do need to talk to you, ma'am. What was a day like when you had that first job in Shenandoah?
Shenandoah?
Yeah.
Well, that's the first time I'd had the own patrol car. Of course, we patrolled the Skyline Drive. And we lived in the park, in a park housing. It was a converted ranger station
barracks.
from a CCC barracks, a tar paper type. It
That's
wasn't.
where you and your girls live? Girl?
Yeah, we had
We had 3 by
we
that
had
time.
three girls by that time, but it was different. But I enjoyed it. I don't know about the family, but the work was excellent. I just enjoyed it.
What did you like about it? Was it just
Well, we had a variation of jobs to do. Mainly, we had to run the boundary and make sure the boundary in that district was marked every 5 years. And that took us through the winter months when you didn't have many visitors. The Skyline Drive ran through Shenandoah National Park from Fort Oglethorpe to Waynesboro. Front Royal to Waynesboro, which was 105 miles. And my district was a central district from, mile 33 to about 65. So it was about a little over 30 miles. And we had three campgrounds in my district, and that, of course, kept you pretty busy. And three concession areas, Big Meadows and the Skyline tourist area, and then
Otter Creek.
Otter Creek.
Mm-hmm.
Otter Creek may have been in the north.
Yeah, that was in the north. Yeah.
He had an interesting experience there, though. He had the president's son come and camp while he was at Big Meadows.
Big Meadows, Yeah, he.
The current president
No,
at the time. No, at the time.
President Eisenhower.
Eisenhower's son?
Wow.
Wow.
And he came to me and asked if he could camp there. I wasn't a question of camping. He didn't want to be known, and so we made sure that he was free to camp and not be bothered by visitors.
Not even the other rangers knew who
Yeah.
he was.
So that was quite an experience for him.
It was really a question of building your career and climbing the ranks of the federal national park system is what brought
Right.
you there, right? Tell me a little bit about how your job evolved over time. What does it mean to be a ranger and then to be a chief and
I started out you're familiar with the GS, right? I started out as a 4 as a seasonal, and a GS4 as the information receptionist in Abraham Lincoln. And then from there, all permanent rangers were 5 to start out with. So I went from a 5 to a GS6 as a sub-district ranger. And in fact, I hit all of,
Never missed a
I didn't
grade.
miss any. Then the 7 as a district ranger, and then an 8 as a chief ranger at Chickamauga, and then as a 9
Mhm.
as a district ranger back on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and then at 10 at let's see. Well,
Mhm.
in Montana,
Yeah.
anyway. So it was.
What did you do that was different?
Well, of course, the administration from a park ranger to a superintendent was considerably different. I preferred the district ranger or the chief ranger because that's what I was really interested in. The administrative part, I always had good employees to work with, and they helped me out a lot. And then,
But what you preferred was to be maybe more the visitors, or do you mean, or no?
pardon?
You like, as you got more administrative, you maybe liked your day-to-day work less, or
Yeah, well, I was with the visitors until you get to be superintendent, and then you don't have much contact with the visitors personally.
Mhm.
And I preferred it the other way, but it worked out real well. The pay was a little better and so forth.
So, Miss Lee, how did your life, raising the girls and following and being part of it, how did your life evolve into doing some of the work over time that we talked about a little bit? How did you start being involved with the park?
Well, if I can go back to how we met.
Sure.
we didn't meet after he came back from the Army. We met when I was 12 and he was 15, out at the wigwams in Cave City. You know where the wigwams?
Sure, we do.
I was visiting here. My stepfather was from here, and his sister took us to the wigwams to get Cokes one afternoon at that little outside place they call the trading post. And he served us the Cokes. And that's how we met. Like I say, I was 12, he was 15.
Yeah.
Little did we know. But then we moved here when I was 13, my stepdad's home, and went to high school together. But we never dated until after he came back from the service. And he actually dated my best girlfriend, which was fine because I got to know him really well as a friend. And then he got back in 1948 in January. And we were married in November of that year. I was 17, he was 21, and here we are, 65 years later. So, being the wife of a ranger was kind of hard in some ways because you were isolated. At least we were isolated. That's not true so much anymore. But we were very often the only employees who lived within 20 or 30 miles, like at Big Meadows in Shenandoah. You know, there was nobody anywhere near, and that's hard when you're a young wife with 3 children, as I was then. It wasn't that way, of course, at Abraham Lincoln. We lived in a little cottage right across the highway from the park for a while, and that's where I first taught school, at a little town called Buffalo, Kentucky.
Well, you were in a one-room school
Well,
first.
yes, I was first, called West School, and I taught there. They came knocking on my door one day, said, "We've heard you have a little college." And I said, "Well, yes, I didn't have my degree yet." And they said, "Well, we really need a teacher out at West School." There were 18 students in 1st through 6th grades. And we had the 2 little girls then. We found a wonderful African-American lady to keep them and cook and clean. She was just fantastic. And I took the job, and I'd only taught out there half a year, one semester, and then they moved us into Buffalo, all of us, the kids and me. And then I was in a room with 63 children and 2 teachers that had been the school library. People think they have it bad now. You know? It was awful. But I didn't particularly like teaching after that. I didn't teach again for 8 years. So, but that was how we got into it. Then we moved, as he said, to Shenandoah. And we did have one neighbor when we first moved to Shenandoah, the Stoddards. There were 2 of the CCC barracks, the old tar paper. You could hold a match up to the wall and the wind from the outside would blow it out. It was okay. We were in the Park Service, and that's what we wanted. And
Were there other? How did that Park Service and the children? How did having the children? Relatively isolated. They went to
Very
school and had some
isolated.
kids. Did you have other people that were in your situation that had kids? So did you have a cohort of?
Well, we got together as often as we could, for like picnics and birthday parties and things like that. But we really didn't see each other very much. We got to be good friends with the district ranger in the North District, and they had a little girl the same age as our second one, so we got to be good friends with them. The main thing, I guess, was doctor. We had to go to Front Royal to a doctor when we lived in Shenandoah, which was over 30 miles. And in the winter, you didn't go on the Skyline Drive. You had to go down into the valley and around. I had our 3rd little girl in March of the year that we moved back up there, 1955. And it was kind of hairy, knowing I had to get 30-some miles in the winter, with her. But we made it, and everything worked out very well. So then by the time our 4th one was born, we were back in Virginia, but not Shenandoah. We were on Blue Ridge Parkway. And it was pretty much the same thing. We had one neighbor, and this is interesting. Of course, we're the Lees. They were the Grants.
Yeah.
And we were 40 miles from Appomattox.
Yeah.
So one day they put a little blurb in the Blue Ridge Parkway newspaper that they put out once a month. And it said, "Well, it's come to bloodshed with the Lees and the Grants. And what it was, he and Wilson had gone to give blood together for a blood drive. They're 40 miles from Appomattox. So, but they were wonderful neighbors, and there were just the two of us there. Then when we got to Custer, there was a little community. We had
4 houses.
4 houses.
With
So-
families.
with families, And we were still 17 miles from town and school. I think this was the hardest thing for the girls. Like when we were on the Blue Ridge, we were 30 miles from school. They couldn't take part in a lot of after-school activities because they had to ride the bus home, until they were able to drive and had a car. But
I bet it was good to have a mother as a teacher, though. I was thinking about that, too.
Yeah,
you know, of
it
course,
was.
my mother was a teacher, his mother was a teacher, so it was a natural thing for me to, and we have 3 daughters who are teachers. So, but just one has an MBA. She is the youngest one. But it's very interesting.
How did that group of those 4 out at the Custer site, that little group of 4 houses or 4 families, what was the dynamic of that like? What was your day-to-day like?
It varied.
Yeah,
Most of the time it was very nice, but at one point we had a mentally ill wife, seriously, and she would put on a uniform like Custer in the morning and come out and blow her trumpet, and it was not pleasant when she was there. Eventually, they were sent someplace else, and he was demoted. It was a very bad situation. But other than that, it was a good situation most of the time. We had a seasonal ranger who insulted the Indian employees, and all Indians totally. Of course, in Montana, that was the majority, and he had to fire him, and when he did, this 220-pound football player picked up his camera, which was on the desk, and threw it at him and fractured his skull. So we've had some interesting times. They were filming Little Big Band at Custer Battlefield. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Dustin
With
Hoffman.
Dustin Hoffman. They actually filmed it between the park battlefields. There's a space that's not park, and that's where it was filmed, and they had set up this beautiful teepee village down on the Little Bighorn and had all kinds of things going on. And so he had put his telephoto lens on the camera to take pictures of the Little Big Man setups, and that's what he hit him with. We've had some interesting experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't know. We wouldn't do anything else if we had to do it again. It's what he always wanted, and
Right.
he reached his goal.
So you retired in
1984.
84.
84.
He's been
Been 30
retired
years
30
now.
years.
Yeah, 30 years. you've
Amazing.
Yeah.
But you kept one or both of you have kept your fingers in the park, working either in volunteer capacity.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about what after you spent your life, and you came. Tell me about the transition back to where we are right here.
Well, of course, it took us about 11 months to build a house because it was pretty slow going. And once we got moved in here, then life became a little more bearable.
Was this in 84?
84, 85.
We moved in 85, yeah.
Mhm.
So, of course, our life has been together. I mean, it hadn't been a whole lot of difference because we've kept in touch with our Park Service retiree friends. And we don't see them very often, but we do correspond.
One thing, this is just kind of a side thing. Before we ever had children, he said, if we ever have a family, I want them to see this country. He said, you can go to Europe, but I want them to see this country. So by the time our first daughter graduated from high school, we had gotten the first 3 girls into all the 48 continental states. So I think that's pretty special. And then we made the other 2. We made Hawaii on our 50th anniversary. So, but He's always been a See America person.
Right. You been to Alaska yet?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We have a daughter up there
That's
now.
how our daughter got it.
Daughter and a grandson, and
2 great-grandchildren.
yeah.
So you've been volunteering, or you've been connected to the park a little bit with some
Well, we did until, as I said, he got
Yeah,
sick.
sure.
And after
for a few
that-
years after.
Yeah.
Right. After that, we just, since 2002, we haven't really done a lot of volunteering in the park. We've done other things. I did adult literacy for several years, and we do a lot of visiting at the nursing homes. We do a lot of church work. Our church is very small. We do. When we first got back, he did an awful lot of handiwork for little old ladies who couldn't get anybody to fix things for them, you know. I mean, we had one that would call him to come change a light bulb. She's gone now. She and her sister both lived to
I
be
think they're all
100.
gone now.
Yeah, they're all gone now. That's the sad part. But we've always been busy. We're into genealogy
Of your own family.
of our own family. If we could just find his great-great-grandfather. Can't find that man, I don't know. This is Thomas Lee's grandfather. Of course, we learned a lot about Thomas Lee as we were doing the volunteer work at the cave. We didn't really know that much about him.
So there were records at the cave. And
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Joy.
what was
Joy
his?
learned
What
with
was?
us.
Tell me about him.
You want to tell him? Thomas?
Oh, Thomas, we go ahead.
Well, he
you're
was a
good.
guide
Yeah.
at the cave in the 1870s, 1880s, and very well known. I mean, he's written up in Hovey's books. You're probably familiar with Hovey. He's written up in several magazine-type articles we have copies of. And his brother-in-law, not his brother, John L. Lee, was another very well-known guide. The two of them kind of worked together. And like I said, we really didn't know that much about him until we started doing the vertical files. And there was Thomas Lee. So Joy, her office at that point was right next door to the room that we were in, which is all gone now. And she was listening as we would learn things, you know, and we all got so excited. So one day they called us, and Scott Teodorsky would like to take us into the cave. They had been looking for a wild cave tour and went to the Giant's Coffin and then down somewhere from there. I don't know. It's not on any path. And they said they would like to show us what they found. So we said, sure. So my sister was here from Florida, and our youngest daughter and her husband from Mississippi at that point. And he took all of us into the cave. Had I known that we were going to have to belly crawl, as we did, you could not even raise your head. I mean, it was scary. I'm scared to death of caves. I don't like caves. But in order to see what they had to show us, we went. Then we did moonwalking, where you walk on, you know. It was a little bit of everything. Finally got to this place. Now, mind you, there are no lights except what's on your helmet, the little carbide lights. We get into this space, and it is so funny. All the way, Thomas had drawn arrows. He draws arrows. And I guess to find his way back out, you know, he would draw the arrows going in. And when we got in, it's a box canyon. So he turned this way, and then he came back and X'd out the arrows. And then he turned this way, and he came back and X'd out the arrows. You can't get out either way from this box canyon. But in the left side of it, about this big, in cursive writing, is Thomas E. Lee, October 1879. We have a photograph of it right there on the wall. And we were just awestruck, you know. I mean, it's just amazing to think this is his grandfather, whom he never knew, of course.
Did you
because-
know when you were young that he was a cave guide, or did you not even know that? Did you know he was?
I didn't know it. My dad didn't mention anything about it. My dad was a guide at New Entrance, in it's seasonal. But he didn't mention his father hardly at all. Well, I didn't ask him. When my dad was born in what is the park too, in Thomas, I'm not sure where he was born, but that is a grandfather.
Somewhere in Edmonson County.
Yeah.
We know that.
What year was your dad born? Father born?
Pardon?
What year was your father born?
1892.
Wow. So you have some deep roots here in the caves.
Yeah,
he
they
does.
were.
I'd like
That
to
goes
show
way
you,
back.
show you some of the photos when
We'll
you have time.
have to definitely do that. What were some of your favorite parts about your service and working? You know, did you have some mentors that you wanted to, some mentors or people that you were helpful to yourself?
Well, I enjoyed every place I've been. I really have.
Joe Caliza was one of the first men that he knew you're going to talk to his daughter, Mary Jo.
Yeah.
Tell me about Joe Caliza.
Now, Joe was in the CCCs at Mammoth Cave back before the war, and then once the war started, then he went in. Of course, he went into service, but he came back, and he was a park ranger at Mammoth Cave later on, and he transferred to Shenandoah, and let's see. Yeah, Cumberland Gap and Great Smokies, and then he came back to Mammoth Cave, and he retired
Superintendent.
as superintendent at Mammoth Cave. Now that's Caliza's father,
Mary Jo's.
Mary Jo. So
But he sort of looked up to him. Of course, Joe was already in the CCCs when he was just a little boy.
yeah, and Joe was a permanent ranger when I was a seasonal guide there. So
So he was always a little.
oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
he was several years older than myself.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed every place we've been. I've liked some places a little better, but I can't say that I dislike any place we were.
What was your year? How many total years were you in the Park Service? How many years?
31.
How did you know it was time to retire?
Well, that's a good question. I guess she wanted to retire.
I didn't want to retire. They were going to get a computer.
Yeah, computers weren't out yet. At least Vicksburg didn't have a computer. And shortly after, they got computers, and I was gone by then.
Actually, it was partly his health. His blood pressure just went sky high the last few months, and once he
Well.
retired, it came back down.
Yeah.
So it was
Smart idea.
it was stressful. We'll put it that way.
At times.
Yeah.
Well, you know the Ken Burns film recently, America's Greatest Idea. What do you think about that? I think who actually coined that phrase? Stegner, I think.
I don't know.
Or the America's Greatest Idea. What do you think about that as far as the national park system?
Well, I guess it's
Yeah.
it's okay.
I think it's wonderful that they've been held so that the average person can enjoy them, not just the wealthy. I think that's the main thing about the parks.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what's your hope for? I mean, it's about visitors and education and all these kinds of things. What's it you hope? Has your thought about what visitors take away from it, did that change over time, or you know what?
Not really. I think that that's what I enjoyed about it being in the Park Service. That the average person can really enjoy it, and we only just assist them in their enjoyment. Hopefully, there were, of course, rules and regulations that we had to make sure they abide by, but that was not a big problem back then. Now I don't know how they do it. all the time that I was a ranger, I never carried a gun, but now it just, all the rangers have guns, and I wouldn't know how to act probably.
It's totally different, I think, now. But for an example, my sister was here last month from Georgia, and she brought her granddaughter, who was 11 years old. And we went out with them, and they went through the cave. We just stayed on top. And they were just blown away, you know. They just, oh, they loved it. They can't wait to come back again. And I think that's never changed. That's always been the way it is. People enjoy parks so much, just whatever the experience, the mountains or the beach or the cave or whatever.
Was it a top-down kind of thing as far as, you know, you working your way into that system? And I guess wanted to ask you if you saw something that should be changed or it would make a system better. Did the overseers in Washington or part of, did they listen to you? Did you have some input into that?
Well, as far as the individual was concerned, if we had something, there was a way to do it properly, and you could put in suggestions, and most of the time you got I guess all the time you got an answer back from what it was. I think it's well done. I have no complaints about it.
So you're able to make changes if you saw them or suggest changes.
Right.
Yeah. It's a big system, so I was wondering.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is, yeah. It's so much bigger now than what it was when we retired. They've increased it considerably, which is good.
When we were in Vicksburg, we had the director of the Park Service as our guest. The gunboat Caro, I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. It's a gunboat that was sunk in the Civil War and was under the Mississippi, the Yazoo
Yazoo River
for 100 years and then brought up.
It's on display now.
And he was responsible. He was there during all the time that they were getting it restored and on a concrete foundation under an overhang. And that was a really, really big job. But there were things like, for instance, scissors. They used scissors that they found on the gunboat to cut the ribbon for the dedication. I mean, they're needles. It's just amazing. They have the whole museum there now for the artifacts from the Caro. And so when they had the dedication, the director came, and we had him at our house for lunch, and that was quite an undertaking. It took everybody in the park to get that done.
Yeah. Pulled together as a team.
Oh,
Right.
yes. Oh, yes. Black and white. We found Vicksburg to be the most racially mixed place, which absolutely shocked us. You know, I had said to him, I'll go anywhere with you but Mississippi. Don't ask me to go to Mississippi. And then as he said, when they called him from Mississippi, he said, well, couldn't possibly leave before 2 o'clock this afternoon. And we got there and found that it was just amazing. The schools were integrated for the first time the year we got there. No problems. Our girls were all there. Of course, I taught in that system for 12 years after I got my degree. And it was just the most amazing thing to me after all the terrible things we had heard about Mississippi. It wasn't
Well, the
that
Corps of
way.
Engineers
Yeah, it was
supplied,
Vicksburg.
it was a headquarters there, and it was a big place.
They probably had more PhDs per square
yeah.
foot than any other place in Mississippi, and that made a big difference, I'm sure. But it was just wonderful, and we had black and white employees at our house for everything we ever had. We didn't ever segregate. You know, the first thing we had was a fish fry. I had no clue how to have a fish fry, so the maintenance people came in and taught me. And after that, we had a fish fry every year, and we always had all the employees, no matter what color, you know. And it was just wonderful. It really was.
So you've had a good life.
We
Yeah.
did. I was really surprised when I got to Vicksburg and found out it was like that. I sort of dreaded it, but it was wonderful.
How much you've grown from that experience.
Oh, goodness, yes, yes. absolutely.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us before we've had a nice interview here? Anything you wanted to, any last thoughts about your career at the Park Service?
I think we had a really good life. I mean, there were times when it was hard, but when we were on top of the Skyline Drive and I had to try to get the kids to the school bus, well, look at that. That's amazing. But all in all, I don't think we'd do anything different.
No, I can't think of anything.